The story you're about to hear is one of the most heartbreaking and bizarre cases in recent memory. It's about a mother who, in a tragic twist of fate, pushed her son on a swing for 2 days straight. It sounds unimaginable, but it happened. In May of 2015, a woman named Romechia Simms took her 3-year-old son, Ji'Aire Lee, to a park in El Plata, Maryland. What started as a regular trip to get some fresh air soon turned into a nightmare. Over the next 48 hours, Ji'Aire would be trapped on that swing, all while his mother, struggling with a serious mental illness, followed instructions from voices only she could hear. But how did it come to this? How did a mother who once dreamed of being a teacher and had a bright future ahead of her end up in this devastating situation? Stay with us as we unfold the events leading up to the tragic loss of little Ji'Aire, and how a mental health crisis led to one of the most disturbing cases of child neglect and loss. Romechia Simms met Ji'Aire Lee in 2008 during a basketball game. James was working as a security guard at the event, and after a few exchanged glances, they struck up a conversation. In the days that followed, they spent more time together and soon started a relationship. By the end of 2010, Romechia found out she was pregnant. At that time, the couple was struggling financially. Romechia still lived with her mother, Romechia Simms, while James was sharing a small apartment with a friend. Despite these challenges, the couple was happy and excited about the future. In August of 2011, their son Ji'Aire Lee was born. Ji'Aire was an energetic child who loved to play, and he quickly became the center of his parents' world. By 2013, things seemed to be looking up for the family. James managed to rent a small 2-bedroom apartment in El Plata, and the family was finally able to live together. Ji'Aire, only 2 years old at the time, spent his days playing with his older cousin, who was his best friend. The family was content in their new home and things appeared to be stable. However, by 2014, cracks began to show in the relationship between Romechia and James. They decided to separate, though they remained in each other's lives, especially for the sake of Ji'Aire. Romechia continued living in the apartment James had rented, as she had nowhere else to go. James moved back in with a friend but still helped out with expenses for their son. As the months passed after their separation, Romechia's life began to spiral out of control. She continued living in the apartment, but things weren't as stable as they seemed. In addition to her personal struggles, Romechia lost her job as a sales associate, which put further strain on her already fragile situation. Without a steady income, paying bills became a constant struggle, and despite James helping when he could, it wasn't enough to cover all her expenses. It was during this time that Romechia began experiencing troubling symptoms. She started hearing voices, something that would deeply impact her perception of reality. Along with the voices came a sense of paranoia. She felt as though someone was always watching her. On several occasions, Romechia would call her mother, Romechia, in a state of panic, claiming that people were trying to kill her. One day, she called, convinced that armed men were outside her apartment. When Romechia rushed over, there was no one there. This wasn't an isolated incident. There were other times when Romechia made similar claims, like when she told her stepfather that armed individuals were trying to get into her apartment. Again, when he arrived, there was no sign of any danger. Romechia's behavior became increasingly erratic. She would often hear the doorbell ring, but when she opened the door, no one was there. In another instance, she called her mother, saying that armed people were outside, but once again, there was no one. This led Romechia's family to begin questioning her mental state. They even checked security camera footage around her apartment, but it only showed that these threats existed in Romechia's mind. By February of 2015, things reached a breaking point. Romechia called James, once again convinced that someone was inside her apartment, trying to get her. She was speaking in a way that made little sense. James, concerned, told her he couldn't leave work but promised to call her mother. When Romechia arrived at the apartment, she found everything normal, except for Romechia, who was now acting strangely. She seemed confused, even struggling to recognize her own mother. Romechia realized something was seriously wrong with Romechia. After seeing her daughter's condition, Romechia decided to take her to the hospital. Tests confirmed that Romechia was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia and depression. She was given medication to help manage the symptoms and was discharged. with clear instructions to take the medication every day. Without the medication, her hallucinations would return, and her condition would worsen. After her diagnosis and treatment, Romechia's mother, Vasha, invited her to move back in with her. At the time, Vasha wasn't living in a permanent home. She was staying at a roadside hotel in El Plata called Deluxe. The arrangement wasn't ideal, but it seemed like the best option for Romechia, given her mental health and financial difficulties. Vasha knew her daughter needed constant supervision, especially now that she was on medication. However, living together again didn't improve their relationship. Romechia and Vasha began arguing frequently, with neighbors reporting hearing shouting from their room. Romechia's behavior continued to be unpredictable, and at times, she even became violent toward her mother. The tension between them grew, but despite their arguments, Vasha always tried to help Romechia as best as she could. In February 2015, after another heated argument, Romechia decided she could no longer stay with her mother. She packed some of her things, took Ji'Aire, and headed to the apartment James shared with a friend. Vasha watched as her daughter and grandson left in a taxi. Romechia hadn't told James about the fight, so Vasha called him to let him know what was happening. As hours passed and Romechia didn't arrive at James's apartment, he started to worry. He decided to retrace the likely route the taxi would have taken. That's when James discovered that something was terribly wrong. Romechia had suffered a hallucination, believing someone was chasing her. In her panic, she opened the taxi door while it was still moving and jumped out, taking Ji'Aire with her. James found her wandering near a highway, lost and disoriented, with Ji'Aire in her arms. It was late in the evening, and the weather was freezing. Ji'Aire was barefoot, wearing only a thin pair of pajamas, shivering uncontrollably. James took them both to the hospital to make sure they were okay. At the hospital, doctors confirmed that Romechia had stopped taking her medication, which had contributed to the severe episode. James, now deeply concerned for Ji'Aire's safety, realized that Romechia was becoming more and more of a danger to herself and their son. He decided to file for full custody of Ji'Aire, hoping to protect him from the instability his mother's condition was causing. On May 20th, 2015, Romechia stopped taking her medication once again. She told her mother, Vasha, that some people had given her and Ji'Aire a pill, and that they both had taken it. She seemed confused and paranoid, convinced that something terrible was going to happen. Romechia told her mother she was going to the pharmacy to buy some medicine for Ji'Aire, who had a slight cold. She also planned to take him to a fast food place and then stop by the park for some playtime. Romechia arrived at the park with Ji'Aire around 11:15 a.m. She put him on one of the swings and began pushing him back and forth. The day passed, and as the hours went by, night started to fall. Vasha, concerned, called her daughter to check in. Romechia assured her that everything was fine and that she would be back soon. But as the night went on and Romechia still hadn't returned to the hotel, Vasha became more worried. The following day, May 21st, Vasha tried calling again but couldn't get a hold of Romechia. She then contacted James to let him know about the situation. James, who was supposed to pick up Ji'Aire for the weekend, was equally concerned when he couldn't reach Romechia. The last time he had spoken to her, she had promised to bring Ji'Aire to him, but now she wasn't answering any calls. By May 22nd, a man walking through the park made a strange observation. He noticed that the same woman, Romechia, and the same child, Ji'Aire, had been in the park for 2 days straight. He thought it was unusual to see them in the same spot for so long, so he decided to call the police. When officers arrived at the park, they found Romechia still pushing Ji'Aire on the swing. The weather was freezing, with temperatures dipping below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and Ji'Aire was visibly still, his body cold and unresponsive. As they approached, the officers quickly realized that the little boy was no longer alive. When questioned, Romechia explained that voices had told her to keep pushing Ji'Aire on the swing. She said that if she stopped, something terrible would happen. She claimed that the voices had instructed her to wait for someone else to come and take Ji'Aire off the swing. This discovery shocked everyone who knew Romechia and Ji'Aire. It was a tragedy that no one could have imagined. The situation had gone from strange to heartbreaking in the span of just a few days. The news of Ji'Aire's death spread quickly, leaving family and friends devastated. James, in particular, was overwhelmed with grief, unable to shake the thought that if he had been granted full custody of Ji'Aire, this tragic event might have been prevented. The emotional toll was heavy, and the heartbreak only deepened as the investigation and court proceedings unfolded. Romechia was taken to the hospital for an evaluation following her arrest. The autopsy report confirmed that Ji'Aire died from dehydration and hypothermia, the result of being left on the swing for 2 days in freezing temperatures. The details of his death were as shocking as they were heartbreaking, and the case drew widespread media attention. In February 2016, Romechia stood trial for the death of her son. The charges against her were serious, but the court would have to consider her mental health. A mental health expert testified that Romechia had been suffering from severe paranoid schizophrenia and that she had been unaware of her actions when she pushed Ji'Aire on the swing. Her condition, they argued, meant she could not fully comprehend the consequences of her actions at the time. Romechia pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter, but the judge ruled that she could not be held fully responsible due to her mental illness. The judge considered her mental state and determined that she was not capable of making a rational decision when she left Ji'Aire on the swing for 2 days. As a result, Romechia was not sent to prison. Instead, the judge ordered her release under strict conditions. She was required to continue her mental health treatment and take her prescribed medication regularly. If she failed to comply, she could be hospitalized again or sent to a psychiatric institution. The court also placed restrictions on Romechia's interactions with children. She was prohibited from being around any child without adult supervision, and regular evaluations were mandated to ensure that she was taking her medication properly. The case concluded with a sense of deep sadness and a tragic realization of how mental illness had played a role in this heartbreaking incident. The case of Romechia and Ji'Aire Lee is a tragic reminder of the devastating effects of untreated mental illness. While Romechia's condition played a significant role in the tragedy, it highlights the importance of early intervention and proper mental health care. Ji'Aire, a young boy full of life, was caught in the middle of his mother's struggles, leading to an unimaginable outcome. Today, Romechia visits her son's grave, often bringing toys and singing songs to him. The pain of her actions and the loss of her son will haunt her forever. But the case also serves as a call for more awareness and support for those dealing with severe mental health conditions, especially when it comes to the safety and well-being of children. The loss of Ji'Aire is something that can never be undone, but it serves as a painful lesson for society to understand the complexities of mental health and its far-reaching consequences. If you found this story important or thought-provoking, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Crime Shade, where we uncover the truth behind real-life tragedies. Your support helps us bring more awareness to cases like Ji'Aire Lee's and reminds us all why mental health can never be ignored. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay aware.